We start with some breaking news from here in London on the longest running miscarriage of justice affecting a living prisoner in UK history. A man who spent more than 37 years in jail for one of the most notorious murders of the 1980s has been freed by the Court of Appeal after new DNA evidence showed he wasn't the killer. Peter Sullivan was jailed in 1987 for the sex attack and murder of 21-year-old bride-to-be Diane Sindall, who was killed as she walked home in Birkenhead in 1986. So let's take you live to the Court of Appeal in central London. We can join our correspondent there, Tom Simons, who's been following the case. Tom, tell us about that historic and quite remarkable movement in court.
Well, Peter Sullivan wasn't in court, he was in prison, where he's been for 38 years, actually, if you include the time he spent before being charged and convicted of this terrible crime. He was at Wakefield prison listening down a video link. There were a couple of hours of submissions to the very senior judges here about his case, primarily about the DNA evidence, which has changed everything, which has proven that there was DNA evidence found on Diane Sindall's body, and it is proven not to be his. We don't know whose it is, but it's not his. And when he heard that the judges had decided that that meant that his conviction could be quashed, he was in tears. He put his head on the table in front of him, and his supporters in the public gallery were also in tears. And we've heard some of them reacting outside court here in the last few minutes. But to give you the background to this case, which has gone on for so long, this is our legal affairs correspondent, Dominic Casciani.
Almost 38 years in jail, now told he is an innocent man. This is Peter Sullivan, jailed in 1987 for one of the most shocking crimes of that decade. He was convicted of murdering 21-year-old Diane Sindall in Birkenhead on the Wirral. Miss Sindall was a much-loved florist and bartender, saving up for her coming marriage. Late at night in August 1986, her van ran out of petrol on the way home, and as she walked in the dark, her killer struck here on one of the town's main roads.
Diane was killed sometime around midnight on Friday, August the 1st, on Borough Road in Birkenhead.
So desperate were the police for leads, they went nationwide, telling the BBC's Crime Watch they had no idea who the killer was.
We haven't got any sightings whatsoever of Diane walking back along Borough Road towards the town centre.
Nobody saw who snatched Diane Sindall off this busy road and go on to murder her in this alleyway. And it took the police weeks to conclude that Peter Sullivan was their prime suspect. 37 years on, that conviction was thrown into doubt by evidence that had been gathered from the crime scene. New DNA testing pointed to another man.
Peter Sullivan's trial heard he'd been spotted at this beauty spot where some of the victims' belongings were set alight. Sullivan admitted the killing to the police, but then retracted his confession. 4 decades on, the DNA profile that's overturned Peter Sullivan's conviction was obtained by the Criminal Cases Review Commission. In 2021, he asked it for help, and it forensically examined evidence taken from the victim, something it had refused to do 16 years ago. It acted this time after being warned it had missed a similar DNA opportunity in the case of Andy Malkinson, later exonerated of rape. This result means Diane Sindall's real killer got away with it. The unknown attacker was free, while Peter Sullivan endured one of the worst miscarriages of justice in British legal history. Dominic Casciani, BBC News.
Now, we have been hearing some responses from those involved with Peter Sullivan's case over the years. In particular, his lawyer, Sarah Myatt, who gave us a statement earlier, read his words, Mr Sullivan's words. He said, "I am not angry, I am not bitter." He said he was just anxious to return to his loved ones and, as he put it, repair what he could from the driftwood, which is my life. Those are his words, Peter Sullivan's, after hearing of his conviction being quashed. And also we heard from Kim Smith, his sister, who perhaps unexpectedly came to the microphone and gave us this.
We've lost Peter for 39 years, and at the end of the day, it's not just us. We haven't won, Peter hasn't won, and neither is the Sindall family. They've lost their daughter, they're not going to get her back. We've got Peter back, and now we've got to try and build a life around him again. So at the end of the day, we feel sorry for the Sindalls, and it's such a shame that all this has had to happen in the first place. So, but that's it now.
Phil, when you heard the news just now?
Ecstatic. It shouldn't have happened in the first place, and now it's out in the open. Everybody knows about it now, and let's hope people will start respecting all our wishes now and understand that Peter was called so many different names, and that all needs to be squashed now, because Peter was never anything of what he was being called in the first place. So thank you very much.
Kim Smith, the sister of Peter Sullivan, giving her response just now. Now, it's the nature of these miscarriage of justice cases that one question is answered, but that opens lots of other questions. Firstly, who killed Diane Sindall on that night in 1986? A really bad day for her parents in many ways. They now don't know the answer to that question. The second question is, what are we doing the right thing for people who feel that they have miscarriages of justice in their cases? This case will, I think, lead to further questions, following that of Andrew Malkinson in 2023, who saw his rape conviction quashed, about whether the bar is simply too high in the system that we have at the moment for people to convince a court and to convince the authorities that their case should get another hearing at the Royal Courts of Justice at the Appeal Court here. There is a review going on, and I suspect that this case will be among those that review is considering.
Tom, thank you.